So when I was a teenager, I spent my whole life out here at Beachmont Baseball. My dad was on the board, and so I knew this place really well. And at some point, they, perhaps foolishly, offered me the opportunity to be the field manager. So what I would do is I'd come out and cut the grass, and I had a tractor. So I'm a 16-year-old kid who gets to drive a tractor, and they pay me to drive it. I mean, gosh, what is better than a summer? And you would drag the field, if you've ever seen that, you know, where you'd have a big chain behind the tractor and you'd drive it in circles, and you'd make the dirt all nice and smooth. And I would actually pull it out of that garage over there. You can see the garage in the distance, and there's a big opening where that's the tractor entrance, where you'd come out, and I'd come out and take care of the fields. And I remember one time, I was looking behind me. So you're driving the tractor and you're occasionally looking back, you know, to make sure that you're going in these like concentric circles, this circle where you're getting wider and wider. You tend to start at the mound and you get wider till you drag the whole field. Well, what I did one time is I was coming in circles on this exact field. This is not some random baseball field. This is where it happened. This is where it went down. And so I'm driving in circles and I'm looking behind me and I'm not paying attention exactly to what's in front of me. And so what was in front of me? That dugout right there. And so what I did was the tractor had a bucket on the front of it, and I smashed into that dugout so hard I like broke one of the posts and the whole roof started to cave in. And man, was I scared, because I was like, oh my word, tonight when all the players get here and the coaches and like my dad and all these people. And I remember thinking, man, I'm in so much trouble. The good news was they were like, you know, it happens to the best of us. They fixed the pole. It was not really a big deal in the end. But part of the reason it was not a big deal is because for a long time, I had done a pretty good job. So I had a pattern of doing the job well. And so therefore, that one mistake was a bit more of an exception than it was the rule. So I'd love to read for you a verse from the book of Colossians. Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men. As for the Lord and not for men. So Dad, when you think about the work that you do, would you patternistically be the guy they would describe as the dude who always runs into the dugout with the bucket truck? And they're like, you know, here's Bill, and golly, every time we hand Bill a responsibility, it's like it flames and problems and it's drama. Or would you be the guy where they go, man, you know, Bill had that thing go wrong and that's really out of character. Gee, that is not like him. And you're gonna get all the grace and all the, you know, acceptance and love that you deserve because you got this pattern of doing it well. And so as an umpire, I took my job seriously. I came on time. I polished my shoes. I cleaned my equipment. I knew the rules, man. I knew the rules better than most of the coaches. As a field worker, I worked hard. I took care of it. My dad taught me all that. My dad was a great example of a very hardworking guy who, if my dad told you it was going to happen on a Tuesday, man, it was going to happen on a Tuesday. And so he had taught me that, and I'd applied that out here enough so that when I went smashing into the dugout, it didn't completely wreck my entire career as a field manager. Which career? I mean, do you have a career as field manager? I guess if you go do it pro, but that's not what I did. But that story about, you know, the failure being the exception, and this idea that in Colossians 3, we're told to work heartily as for the Lord, that's the story I want to land on today and use it to send us out on this week's mission. You probably have something coming up, whether it is a job-related thing where you're going to go to a meeting next week, or you got a project you're working on, or you are a volunteer on a committee, you lead a ministry, or you are doing something related to your family and it's coming up, and you're going to be the guy who needs to get something done or be part of a meeting. How would you approach that meeting or that problem or that project differently if you thought, when we go to sit down in that meeting, there's going to be, 7 people in the meeting. Oh, and by the way, that 8th chair, God's going to show up and sit in that 8th chair. Or you got to have this conversation with your family and you think, I got my 3 kids and my wife, there's going to be 4 people there. We're going to have this conversation, but in that 5th chair, God's going to be sitting in that 5th chair. How would you approach your work or your volunteer committee assignments if you thought every single one of them God showed up to? Because guess what? He actually does. He's always there. And he tells us in his word, do your work heartily as if it's unto the Lord. So this week, Dad, there's something you're going to do with your kids, your wife, or your work that you might be tempted to do part of the way or do the minimum or just get by. But instead, I'm going to ask you this week, do your work heartily as unto the Lord, so that if there are mistakes and there are errors like the one I made when I drove the tractor into the dugout, they seem like exceptions, not the rule. Dad, go do that, because you're not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose.